Hello, I'm John Atack. This is my great friend Yuval Laor, PhD in cultural studies. He has studied culture. And we're today going to talk about the new atheists, and which Yuval has some opinions about. And it may be safe to say that Yuval would probably describe himself as an atheist, and I describe myself as an agnostic because I haven't got a clue. And we'll work on it from there. Okay.
I am an atheist, but I'm very critical of the new atheists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying that we could talk about their beliefs, or we could talk about their prescription for society.
Yeah, and you know, since we're doing a shorter recording today, I think that we can just focus on their prescription. We can give a brief, summary of what it is they believe and how they maybe how they got there in a sentence or two. But yeah, so let's start with who the new atheists are. It's primarily for writers, popular writers, but I'm sure there's many others that would want to join the group.
But there are four
these are
pretty famous ones. I mean, Jonathan Miller would have been a fifth one, but we're not going to talk about him today.
Yeah, so these are Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, and the guy who passed away,
Hitchens.
Hitchens, yeah, Christopher Hitchens. And they are atheists, which is fine.
Well, they were atheists in one case. It's like there used to be a thing that was run in a Danish newspaper every week, which was Nietzsche, God is dead. And eventually somebody ran back, God, Nietzsche is dead. So in this case, for Hitchens, he is an ex-atheist.
Yeah, and for three of them, for two of them, for Richard Dawkins and for Daniel Dennett, I think their politics are significantly better than certainly Sam Harris. But Hitchens used to have good politics, but then he became politically bad. But regarding the Israeli-Palestinian, he remained holding a better opinion, opposing apartheid. But Sam Harris, it's a lot more complicated, I think, regarding his, he said pretty bad things about Islam, and he's very pro-torture. So, but that's not why, that's just another reason to be critical of him.
Yeah, people who approve of torture.
Yeah, and if we look at their atheism is based on an approach to culture that is, well, with Richard Dawkins, it's actually mimetics. And it seems like the others also hold mimetics or some kind of version of it.
So tell our lovely audience what mimetics means.
So mimetics is a proposal by Richard Dawkins in 1982 in his book, The Extended Phenotype, where, which is his best book, where he, so he has a bizarre theory about how genes are replicators, which they're not. Biologists today do not think that they're replicators.
That's the idea that the gene is a read-only.
Yeah, that it's read-only, that it's well defined, that we know what it is, which is also wrong. The gene is a metaphor, not just a cell.
Yeah.
Things are a lot more complicated. The genes are always sitting in a chromatin sleeve that turns them on and off, and the same DNA creates a liver and a kidney, which are very, very different. Hair and teeth, which are different. It also, the same DNA creates a queen bee and a worker bee.
Yep.
So the whole metaphor, which Richard Dawkins proposes, that the DNA is the recipe and animal is the cake does not work at all. And the mutations, we know that they are not random. They're not random. There's certain places on the genome that are much more likely to mutate, which means that it's not random in space. There are times of stress where the organism increases the number of mutations, so it's not random in time, and also apparently not random in size, like that.
Yeah, I mean, just as an aside, last year I had a hybrid arise from my tomatoes. I grow 10 or a dozen varieties of tomatoes every year, and the best tasting variety I've ever had of the 100 and more is the Cherokee chocolate. And tomatoes tend to be true to the mother. I mean, it is said the apple never falls far from the tree, but it does, because it's more likely to be the father that actually, it's just the way it goes. So for years, I've grown Cherokee chocolate, and I put the seeds in next year, and even though the plants have been next to other plants, they've pollinated themselves. And I get a Cherokee chocolate, which is a brown, scabby looking thing. You get 4 or 5 of them in a season. It's not great, but they taste better than any other tomato, the so-called black tomatoes, black Russians. They just taste better. So I grow them. But last year we had one arise that was not brown and scabby. It was smaller. It fruited heavily. It fruited twice. It had the fantastic taste of the Cherokee chocolate. So it went, great. This year I'll just collect the seeds from that one plant. And we got a little bit of a surprise, because we have 7 completely different tomatoes that have come from the seeds of that plant. And they're different shapes, they're different colors. A couple of them don't have the great flavor, 5 of them do. Some of them are kind of mahogany color. Some of them have what's called a strawberry point on them, showing that, something happened along the way here, that the genes were not selfish enough. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and the question of variation, which for people who believe in the genetic theory that Richard Dawkins proposes, all the source of the variation is always random mutation. But when mutation is not random, and the variation becomes a much, much more complex and interesting subject, must not be ignored. Cannot be brushed aside saying variation, that doesn't matter. Selection, that's the only thing that's important. And also with Richard Dawkins, there is an insistence that there is no group selection, not in space and not in time. So there's no lineage selection, which is a weird kind of group selection over a lineage. Is tied to evolvability and important things, but without group selection, you cannot even have a group of genes being selected together. So that is a theory of genes. Now, Richard Dawkins in 1982 proposes that culture behaves the same way as genes. Right? So this is a Platonic project that Plato said that if you look at the soul and if you look at the city, they should have the same structure. And Richard Dawkins gives us a similar kind of argument. If you look at the genes, if you look at culture, they should have the same kind of algorithms that run them. In either case, it's not justified. But mimetics believes that a person's culture is just a set of ideas that they believe in. So for people who believe in mimetics or in some other variations, culture is just beliefs that you hold, and you act based on the beliefs that you hold. And religion is like, if you take the stories of Little Red Riding Hood and Jack and the Beanstalk, but you believe them seriously. So if you're religious, you believe in Noah's Ark and Samson and his hair, and you just believe those seriously. But that doesn't work. That does not.
Well, I mean,
work.
You can see I've had a haircut and I feel much stronger. So the Samson thing is nonsense.
Yeah, you're not a so
So maybe
because
I'm a Philistine. Who knows? You know.
yeah, the reason it doesn't work, mimetics, is because, as we know, uh, you can believe in a religion without knowing what it is, right? So you can believe in the Bible without knowing what's in the Bible. You
And
can
many, there are very few believers who have actually read. I mean, it's perhaps more in Islam that you'll find people who've actually read the Quran. But in
yeah,
Christianity, you'll find an awful lot of people, the majority, who've never actually read the Bible from cover to cover.
yeah,
And it is quite a hard task. I mean, the Zend of
and
Vesta is probably even more difficult, but yeah.
the thing is that they don't only believe in the Bible, because you need to read Augustine, you need to read
Thomas Aquinas.
yeah, you need to read a lot of Darby, the Rapture. That's a 19th century addition to Christianity. Um, so you can believe in things without knowing what they are. You can completely ignore the things that you hold most dearly, which is very important, because if you, for example, believe that God will take care of your, take care of your sustenance, you cannot rely on that belief. You must make sure to. I mean, there are
Jesus said we should have no thought for the things of tomorrow, which is the illusion I think you made. That God will look after you. Now, of course, Buddhist monks actually do, wander around, or they did. They now gather into monasteries, but they're only allowed a begging bowl and a robe, and that's their lot. And if somebody doesn't give them any rice, they starve to death. But that's not because of God, because they don't believe in God. So they believe in rice. They believe that rice will come to them through some other magical means.
No, so there is the possibility you can be a Christian and not turn the other cheek when you're struck. You can be a Christian and not give all your money to the poor. So
surprisingly,
so if you look at regular belief, I believe there's a traffic jam on the highway, so I should wait until that's over. Or I believe that I ran out of milk, so I should not
make any coffee.
Yeah. Those are beliefs that are much harder to ignore. The belief that you should turn the other cheek when someone hits you, that's actually easier to ignore. So,
but you only have to do it 7 and 70 times 7. So you count up how many times they hit you, and then you can thump them.
Yeah, that's right. So the final reason is that when you accept a religion, you don't only accept the beliefs that are contained in that religion, right? So if a person becomes a believing Christian in Central America, that Christianity might come with liberation theology.
Yeah.
If you become a Christian in the American South or places in the United States, that might come with a member of the Christian right.
Or lynching,
or supporting Donald Trump, or things that are not part of. So to say that a religion is just a set of beliefs a person holds, right? And as Sam Harris, I think, is quoted as that Islam is the ultimate collection of bad ideas or something like that. But a religion is not a collection of beliefs in any way. And if you take, for example, the Christian Bible and Augustine and all those texts as Christianity, you can see that regular Christians are not anything like that.
No, and which is perhaps why there are so many thousands of different sects out there.
Yeah, and as E. Evans Pritchard showed, that you can have two cultures that have the same religion but completely different cultures, values and norms, and then two cultures that have very similar cultures and values and norms but different.
Yeah, and we would absolutely recommend Evans Pritchard. Remarkable intellect, lovely bloke.
Yeah.
And in fact, you can apply what he said about the study of so-called primitive religions to the modern students of religion in sociology. And it's quite interesting when you take his criticisms of that and say, well, actually, this is still going on, with ideas like new religious movements, as if that told us anything. You know, we've put these words together which don't mean anything to do with newness, religion, or movement.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So this is the sort of the set of beliefs of the new atheists, right? If we
which
talk
are
about
passed on
culture.
mimetically as little tokens to their
That's right.
their children.
And of course, with mimetics, we know historically that you know, an example I gave before is that according to mimetics, the reason England is Protestant rather than Catholic is because the Protestant memes beat out Catholic memes in the minds of people on the island. But in reality, England is actually Protestant. Bloody Mary died young, without children.
Without bringing forth child.
an heir.
And because Henry VIII wanted to have sex with Anne Boleyn.
Yeah. And then they turned back and forth and back. You know, so the idea that it's some kind of that it's a battle of memes out in the population, when it's actually in many situations the result, you know, persons call, you know, religion depends on the sovereign and depends on the relation with the sovereign and you know, all sorts of historically contingent you know, parameters that are not at all the way culture is described by mimetics.
It's confused by because the word meme is now used for anything that goes viral on the internet,
creative
and
original.
And that's got nothing to do. Even though Richard Dawkins, I saw him in an interview a few weeks ago where he was, you know, sort of saying, "Yep, that's all down to me," and it's just like, it's like the word spam, which it means spiced ham. It isn't, you know, and just because Monty Python made a song up about it, and it's now become email you don't want. So meme in the original Dawkins sense is
something that replicates.
Well, it's spiced ham, and meme in the internet sense is email you don't want. The difference between them.
Yeah.
Yes, it's something that will, like a little token, it will be replicated, and you'll get, you know, this same little imprinted token will then go on, and it's just not the way that the world works.
No, or not the way culture works. You could say that there's certain niches within culture of, you know, technology or something like that, where something like that does resemble that. But
a printed circuit board is a printed circuit board, and a chip is a chip, and there the twain shall meet. And those are things that can be replicated within technology, but they're not culture, they're not ideas.
Yeah,
and
to talk of ideas as and think that you can have them independent from other emotional and psychological aspects is a problem. If we go back to what to the new atheists, what their prescription to what we should be doing now. So they see the problem is religion, and religion is just people holding wrong ideas. And their prescription is to talk to them. Sometimes talk to them forcibly, and sometimes, you know, insult their belief, their religion. They see that there's a very big problem, that people do not voice any criticisms of religion, which, you know, you can say is sometimes a problem. But what they offer, and this sort of goes back to Jürgen Habermas of the Frankfurt School, who says that the solution is always more talk, right? So, and this is yet another talking cure.
As Ron Hubbard said, more communication, not less, is the answer. You know,
yeah,
so it's not a new thought.
If you
but
look
it is
at
a part of the new thought movement, you know.
You look at the talking cures in the 20th century. We had Freud give us a talking cure for mental illness or mental
So
problems.
the thought was not original to him, let's point out.
Yeah, and there's Wittgenstein told us that we need a
Language
talking
game.
cure for philosophical problems, that we need to talk about them differently. And here we see in Habermas and later the New Atheists, the proposal that we just need to talk with religious people, point out their mistake, and that would be the solution for problems. The problem is that when you insult religious people, or when you try to correct them or you try to criticize their religion, that doesn't have the effect people hope that it will have.
No.
As Festinger in 57 showed us in cognitive dissonance theory, when someone has to, I guess that would be after 57.
Well, actually, the first publication on cognitive dissonance predates 57, but let's not get into that.
Yeah. But if someone's ideas, someone has to defend a belief, then they'll believe it more.
Yeah.
Not less. So
exactly.
it is valuable to have discussions like with religious people, but it's not for the aim of changing the mind of the religious person. It is for the aim of maybe third parties who might be influenced by the discussion. But the hope that you will change the person you're talking to, that is actually a lot less likely, and likely to be counterproductive.
Yes, I mean, the other part of the cognitive dissonance hypothesis is that you actually strengthen the belief of the person that you're arguing against. Just as, because I happen to have it by the side of me, I think I have here the first paper that was published on cognitive dissonance.
I can add a little more about
Social Communication and Cognition, a very preliminary and highly tentative draft by Leon Festinger, which I think was 1954. But we're talking about the early 50s, and we're becoming, I'm becoming extraordinarily pedantic, but there we go. Yes, 1954, the first paper published by Festinger. And Spike doesn't like me holding up books because she says she can put them on there. But this is a very good book about, which points out cognitive dissonance is the most researched area of psychology. There are more, there's more substantiating evidence for this than for any other idea.
Yeah, and it's easy to do.
And that's what you were referring to, the 1957 publication. So that we've completed that pedantic pedagogic pathway.
So the problem with the new atheists can always be traced back to their beliefs about culture, because culture is made of replicators, and culture as sort of kind of manipulating us. With culture, they do actually hold the belief that there's things like meme plexes, which is group selection of memes, apparently. So that I guess can work, but the prescriptions and the ideas that we just need to change people's minds, and the way you change people's minds. If you
stop
like
believing
me,
in
believe,
sky fairies.
Yeah. If you
not very persuasive.
You like me believe that there's many different ways for a person to be committed to a set of beliefs, and that with religion, many times the commitment is on our experiences, and to understand the importance of our experiences and changing people's minds, and making them very rigid in their beliefs, the opposite of changing their minds. And the whole approach to culture that is proposed by the new atheists, which is well, in the case at least of Hitchens and Sam Harris, it is a right-wing, neoconservative. We got to attack them first because they believe crazy things. But of course, there's many, many, many ways to be, for example, Muslim. You can be a Muslim who's completely not homophobic or very homophobic, like you can be a Christian that's not homophobic or very homophobic.
You can see the Bible as being a collection of pieces of advice, or as a series of literal truths. It's a very wide church.
And beyond advice, you can say that it's a collection of great truths, which means that they might not be literally true, but they're relevant to many, 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 many contexts, maybe even every context. And that is, you can say that Aesop's fables are not true because the stork didn't have that conversation with that fox. But you can say that they hold great truths because they're relevant to many contexts. There is, and in a sense, Aesop fables are more true than whatever, something else, because they have that aspect.
Yeah. Or Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories. Let's put in a plug for those as well.
What's
Rudyard Kipling, the Just So stories.
Yeah.
Let me interject also that atheism might not be quite as simple as they think. There was a survey last year of a fair amount of atheists about their beliefs. And while none of them believed in God, which is what made them atheists, 71% of them believed in the supernatural. So this notion of atheism and what it is, and you then get that we have in the UK now, atheists get together to sing songs on a Sunday and do this kind of stuff. Richard Dawkins even proposed a few years ago that they wear T-shirts with a scarlet letter A on them, which reminded me of Hester Prynne in the novel The Scarlet Letter, where the A meant adulterer.
Adulterers.
But, in this case...
but
we get this strange idea of collecting people together and making new memes,
Yeah, but that goes back 200 years to Auguste Comte. Auguste Comte is, you can say, the father of sociology, even though he's before the other fathers of sociology. And he saw that religion has a function, but is based on thought that it was based on a mistake. And as such, he said, let's keep the function, let's meet once a week, let's do the songs, but let's have it focused on, let's say, Auguste Comte.
But we can go...
his proposal.
We can go much further back in history than that. We can go back to 500 BC and Zhengfuzhu, Confucius, who basically explains that to create unity in a culture, you need common beliefs. And it's quite evident looking at the Confucian Analects that just like Leo Strauss, who followed him at Chicago University and gave us neoconservatism, that the guys in the white hats and the guys in the black hats, this myth, you don't have to believe in it. The overlords, and let's not be sexist, the overladies, can deter, they don't have to believe in this stuff, but to bind a society, and of course the word religion means binding together, ligere, ligament, that kind of stuff. To bind a society together, you have a common set of beliefs, and those beliefs could be in Auguste Comte, as you say, or Confucius. China has actually had 2,500 years of Confucianism, and Mao is just changes it from the family to Mao. You just have to, be part of.
To the
Mao becomes Big Daddy, and still is, even though dead. So it's this tenuous idea of the atheist memes have not been passed on very well. Does this lead us into these people who call themselves street epistemologists?
I don't know.
People who will challenge somebody on the street and set about changing their beliefs. And it's like, so we've got born again Christians doing it, and Krishna monks and Scientologists and what have you. And now we've got people who, sort of going, you're wrong. Or Rollo
these
May.
are people who would bring a soapbox to the whatever Hyde
Corner.
Park and stand on it instead of saying the end of the world is near because of, you know, because the rapture is coming. They'll say the end of the world is near because climate change is going to kill all of us. Which, you know, I do think it's fine. And I do think that for a third party, when you argue with someone who's religious, can be useful for third parties to see the argument and make their own sense.
Yeah.
But just when you're with your family at you know, a holiday dinner and you insult your grandmother for believing in this or that, that might not be as recommended.
No, I mean, I was quite shocked. I mentioned Jonathan Miller before, and I must say that Jonathan Miller is one of the people I've highly respected throughout my life. You know, he started his life, well, he started his public fame as a part of Beyond the Fringe with Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, and Alan Bennett. They were very successful. They traveled to America and renamed their show Behind the Fridge for some reason. But they were really groundbreaking. He was a medical doctor. He made television shows about medicine, which were really groundbreaking, explaining the body and how it works. He then became a director of operas. He directed operas at La Scala and made sculpture in his spare time, and just came over as the most delightful dinner guest you could ever wish to meet. Then, not long, a couple of years before he died, he decided he'd make a program about his atheism. He grew up in an atheist Jewish household. And, you know, so he grew up without religion, and he's one of the people that talks about the virus of, you know, he wasn't injected with the virus of religion. As a doctor, he should have understood better what a virus is, but it's just become such a common.
Well, that's the mimetics metaphor.
Exactly. But then he makes this TV program about atheism. I remember him talking to Arthur Miller, the famous playwright and former husband of Marilyn Monroe, who wrote The Crucible. Who's an atheist, devout atheist. What shocked me in the program was that Miller comes over as I say, the most delightful dinner guest, a truly urbane and courteous man. But you got him walking out of the room with the theists he'd been talking to and making sniping comments to his atheist friends about them. So you got that he had, you know, there's a facade, and you know, at least with Sam Harris, there's no facade. He hates people. You know, it's quite open. You know, how stupid you are to believe that. Why aren't you clever like me? It's kind of Stefan Molyneux sort of ego that we seem to be dealing with.
But of course, you know, it's very clear to me that there's many religious people that are way smarter than you and I. You know, that I mean, the historical characters that were religious, and yet
T.S. Eliot, Aldous Huxley, Evelyn Waugh, all of them converts, all of them, you know, tremendous contributors to culture.
Yeah, and so it just, we need to remember that a person's religion means a lot less than about what they believe. Now, if you told me that someone is Christian, but also that they belong to a, you know, whatever, a specific sect, and they live there, and they're part of that culture, then I'll know a whole lot more about what they believe, because I could judge that from their cultural context, right? So if someone grew up in the Westboro Baptist Church, which is a Christian church, or I would be able to make much more judgments. But that's because I know about the specific culture. It's not just a set of ideas, because you know, as we said, and all those religions change over time drastically. They change geographically. So it's just, the religion is not enough to determine culture. You know the culture and the religion, then yes, then you know a lot more. But just the religion does not has one-to-one correlation with cultural anything.
Not at all. And there is a deception in our culture that science and religion are in some way opposed. I mean, I
Yeah.
was taught this at school, and the idea is that Galileo was shown the instruments of torture because he said that the Earth went round the sun. Well, Copernicus has said that before. It was accepted doctrine within the Catholic Church. It was not a problem. Galileo was shown the instruments of torture because he had called his friend, who had become the Pope, Buffo, or the idiot, in a dialogue. So he was told that he'd got to be. But when we look at his life, this man who defines the science standing up against religion, there are a few things worth noting. One of them is he faked the results of many of his experiments. Statisticians have taken them apart and said he was making this up. If you do drop this weight of feathers and this weight of lead, there'll be a greater air resistance when you drop this because of the, it's a bigger area. Yeah. But so it's been said that about 50% of his experiments were faked. Secondly, he had 2 children, both daughters, and he put them both into a nunnery. Now, this may be because he was too mean to pay dowries for them, but when he was, and one of the daughters hated it and died young there. There's a wonderful book called Galileo's Daughters about this. The other daughter became the abbess of the nunnery, and his house arrest finally was next door to the nunnery, so he could see his daughter. So Newton spent far more time.
Newton, the story of that he became an atheist, such a symbol, but that was the work of Halley from Halley's Comet after the death of Newton. There was a project
was a Unitarian
to turn him into a saint for atheism. Historically, he was a weird religious.
He spent more time working on exegeses of the Bible, trying to determine
the book of Daniel,
the measurements of the Temple of Solomon, because they would be the proportions of the universe. He was an alchemist. He took far too much mercury in, so he went a little bit nutty. If we then go on to Dalton, the father of modern chemistry, he's a minister. Even when you look to Darwin was very specific that he was not an atheist. He was an agnostic. And people tend to forget that he was also a theology student, and that some of the notion, and of course it was his grandfather Erasmus who talked more about evolution.
And contemporary. Not to mention Mendel, who was.
But it's Darwin is particularly influenced by Alexander von Humboldt. That that's his primary influence. But he is, when you look at the ideas of, and by Lamarck, when you look at the ideas of evolution, you can understand that when you look at the castes of angels and this kind of thing, that he had, as a theology student, been exposed to ideas of this type. Also, alchemy, of course, has the evolution of the elements as a fundamental aspect, going back to the 12th century. The point I'm making is that the majority of the founders of modern science were religious people, especially when you go back to Al-Jibbar and the Muslims.
And of course. And many people today think that atheism is just a strange version of Protestant Christianity.
In some cases, they're right.
And there's in the secular age, Charles Taylor shows you how actually Christianity played very, very important key roles in the birth of science. I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas was the same. He gave us natural philosophy, which separated theology from science, but that's a religious person doing it. So,
or the translation movement in Islam, which gives us optics and surgery and quarantine and all sorts of ideas. So the idea that there is some dichotomy, some dualism, black and white opposition between that makes atheism rational, science rational, and religion irrational. That doesn't. Not real.
It's a lot more complex. Now, every once in a while, there are things that are correct. There are crazy religious. There's all sorts of, but it's just the reductionism is extremely problematic and politically problematic.
Explain reductionism.
So the idea that you can reduce culture to ideas, right? So instead of culture having a robust thing about experiences and childhood, you know. So if you take what Richard Dawkins calls the meme, right, this idea, and say that the idea, you know, uses a person to replicate himself, the idea is not independent of the person. So the same idea would be received differently by a drunk person, by a 5-year-old person, by an adult person. If the source of the meme, if the person who said it is a stranger on the street, it's very different than if it's the Pope. It's very different than if it's your mother. It's very different than the mindset that you're in at the time. If you've just seen a ghost, you might react differently to a meme. If you just drank alcohol, if you know, all the idea that you can take culture and reduce it to just, you know, the ideas that people believe in, and give it sort of a mathematical sort of spreadsheet. I believe in these 50 out of 73 ideas, and in those 83, and which is, you know, kind of it's within a certain Platonic tradition, but I'm believing in that. The basic metaphor is not mathematics the way Plato told us, but should be biology.
Yes.
The way Aristotle told us, and then culture is a big jungle with all sorts of ideas that interact in very complex ways, or don't interact. It's just it's unpredictable. It has has a lot of interdependencies. So, and I think that that's a better metaphor of how to think of many things, you know, the economy, culture, rather than this mathematical spreadsheet kind of idea. You know, the economy is just, you know, a spreadsheet of what each company makes and how much it's worth.
And the rational expectations that we can have with behavior in people who are generally not rational.
Yeah. So the new atheists, as I said, they come to reasonable conclusions, but they start with a very, very faulty assumptions regarding the nature of culture.
Fair enough.
All their later conclusions are faulty or problematic.
I think we can probably wrap it up at that point. I think we've reached a potential conclusion, though these discussions never actually do end.
And we might come back to the new atheists and talk about, you know, their relationship to the science wars and to structuralism and post. That's another day.
That's another day. Thank you so much.
Yuval
Laor. I'm Jon Atack, and thank you for watching us. Hi, Jon here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much. We've completed that pedantic pedagogic pathway.